Oh, okay, I guess we're back on. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, folks, we're about to start, so bear with us. Hang on, just let me just start the slideshow. So there we go. Okay, you folks on Zoom, can you see the slideshow?
I can't see.
No.
No.
You have to do the share screen thing.
I did.
Well, you were on share screen, but see that?
Let me just. Let's see. Okay. Let me just start again. So there's the. Now let me go back to the Zoom meeting. Share screen. So it's. Let me just cancel that share screen again. See, PowerPoint should be that one.
Yeah.
Okay, can you see it now, guys?
Now you can. They can see it. You can see them.
And you're not.
Should be able to. Yeah. Well, now they can see that presentation, so that's fine.
That's all they need to see.
If that's them, yeah, that's them.
On Zoom, can you see the presentation slides?
Shaking her head, yes.
Okay.
I see the poetry summit.
Yes. Can you see the slides changing?
Yes.
It's recording.
Okay, ready?
Okay, people, let's reconvene after the break. I hope everyone had a great time talking to each other. Let me go ahead and introduce. You have a line? Okay. I need attention. Thank you. Okay. As I said earlier, Andy Laufer participated in the recent San Francisco, or the poetry workshop at the San Francisco Writers Conference. And he's here to tell us all about it. Andy is a storyteller, poet, and author. He has recently published Papa Laufer's Stories, Positive Reflections of Life in America, a collection of single-page vignettes about his life experiences, and he has a couple here for sale if you're interested. Also, before he takes, Mike, I just want to remind people that there are some name tags over here that people have ordered. They're ready now. If your name is among them, go ahead and pick it up for yourself. Anyway, without further ado, here's Andy, and if you would please make him welcome.
Thanks, Cheryl. Hello, everybody. I'm so pleased to have been able to go down to San Francisco to the San Francisco Writers Conference, and it was a specific day, a poetry summit day. I am a poet. I have been published a couple different times, and done a lot of readings here and there. I don't write poetry every day. I'm not a literary person. I am, but I never went to school for it or anything like Chris. We just like doing it, and so it was a real thrill for me to go down to a writers' conference. In fact, the brochure for the writers' conference is right here. If anybody wants to see it, you can pass it around. Take a look at it. You'll see Jeannie from last month in there. She was a speaker, not at the poetry summit, but at the writers' conference. One of the challenges was getting there. I ended up trying to find parking and so on and so forth. So I decided to do BART. It was an adventure just getting down there. I went down to Berkeley, got on the BART train, and it was just great. Dropped me off at the front door of the hotel right there in the Embarcadero, and it was a fantastic day. So there are three basic ideas that I came away with that day. One was to submit only your best work. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that. If you're going to submit something for publication, make sure it's your best work. The second thing is make revisions until every single line sings. We'll talk a little bit about that too. You want the readers to go to the next stanza or turn the page or whatever. And then three is to find your voice while writing with your heart. Okay, those are the three things that I hope you get out of this presentation today. So the first part of the day was basically about insights and prompts. We had panel members that were asked to provide us with insights and prompts. So when a poet is blocked, I thought that was pretty interesting. When the poet is blocked, it's because they're trying to address something very specific. Okay, they're looking at what they know instead of what they're feeling in their heart a lot of times. And so when they're trying to wrap their head around that or their pen around that, that's when they get blocked. They need to focus on the heart, and they need to find a state of wonderment to address that in their poetry instead. That's the idea. And it's kind of the separation between poetry and perhaps other writing. It's the wonderment that you want to feel. You want the emotion to come out. Techniques were offered instead of prompts a lot of times for people. Taking the end words from a poem and then creating a new poem using those same end words was a technique that they suggested using. And I actually have an example of that up here if anybody's interested and wants to see it. It's just a means of stimulating your imagination. Take nouns from a theme and incorporate them into another poem. Like, let's say nouns from nature. You know, whatever, tree, leaf, grass. And then put that into take a poem and replace the nouns in that poem and put the nature nouns in there. It's just another way to stimulate some thought and energy into your imagination. And then try creating, this is an interesting one, if you want to make your poem exquisite, this is what the lady told us. She said, try creating the opposite of every line in your poem. Use free association. You'll have to use free association to make your poem more exquisite that way. Okay, so again, it's just that you're thinking about your poem, you're thinking about what you're saying, you're thinking about the words. Trying to make it opposite helps you to decide if it's correct or not. We had 3 publishers come up and talk with us, and they were asked to tell us what do they look for in deciding what to publish. So there's 16 Rivers Press. It said they looked for a distinctive voice, a commitment to work with the press for 3 years. It was very interesting. They had a small consortium, maybe a group of people about this size, that forms their group. They'll split up the submissions between a few of them to subgroups, and then they'll take the best, and then everybody reads them, okay? Everybody in their group. If they select an author, that author then must agree to work with them for 3 years as a member of their group. So it's very interesting, and it's a good way to keep fresh eyes in the group because they have to have people, a lot of turnover. So it was a pretty interesting press. There's a lady, what was her, I can't remember her name, but anyway, Blue Light Press. We'll take questions at the end, I guess. Okay, so Blue Light Press, the woman who did Blue Light Press was the kind of the MC of the whole show. Her bottom line was the work must be imagistic, inventive, and emotionally honest. It's the first time I'd ever heard that word, imagistic. Okay, so let's see. She stressed the importance of knowing the publisher too. I thought that was pretty interesting. Go get some books that the publisher has done. Maybe some anthologies. Okay, look at their anthologies too. That's a good way to figure out what kind of poetry they're looking for, seeking. So what kind of books do they publish? Is it consistent with your style? If it's not consistent with your style of poetry, just go find another publisher. And then there was New Alexandria Publishing Company, and they encouraged more new poets and avant-garde poets. At least that's how they like to consider themselves. And they encouraged the publication of short, maybe 5-page documents, 5 separate poems, as a means of marketing. And we'll get into marketing in a little bit. But so it wasn't just books that they were looking for. Well, okay, talking about marketing. Bernard, I don't know anything about marketing either. Hardly any of these people know anything about marketing, but they got into it. They do understand that the digital buzz has become a critical component of marketing. You've got to get your name out there in the social media. Social media has changed the entire landscape of marketing. And they talked about it being helpful if you can have your target audience review your material. And that's what I wanted to ask you. Do you all know who your target audience is? That's kind of a, if you do, that's great. Do you know how to find people in your target audience? And do you know how to market to them? And those are three questions that you really have to kind of figure out if you want to get into marketing. But that really was the extent of the marketing that they talked about. So it wasn't real, there wasn't a lot there. 3 poet laureates came onto the stage and read their poetry, or the first fellow, Tongo Hyson Martin, was the poet laureate of San Francisco, current poet laureate. He used spoken word to express his thoughts and emotions. It was very dynamic. It was very intense. He stressed the need to cooperate with yourself when creating poetry. And that was kind of a funny way to put it. I mean, so to help your pen flow, you've got to be able to cooperate with your thoughts and yourself. And then you'll have less difficulty writing so much. Kim Shuck was the poet laureate of San Francisco a few years ago. She was a huge fan of Tongo and stressed the need to practice your craft daily. So did Tongo, actually, every day. People who are, doing poetry for a living typically and often write every single day, work on their poetry every single day. It's just what they do. And then there was a woman called, I can't even say her name, Partho Sereno. She was the poet laureate of Marin County a few years back. Very elegant woman. She finds inspiration in temples. And to help her with that, she imagines everywhere she is as a temple. So if she came to this restaurant, she would kind of imagine herself as being in a temple. And that helps with her imagination and her flow. So she's done some really good stuff. Finding your voice. Now, what I found to be most fun at the conference was the question and answer sessions after each panel member, we're done talking. And finding your voice was a discussion that came out of the question and answer session. And the question was, when you find your voice, is it always there? Do you always know where your voice is? It was just a different question, and Tongo said that finding your voice is not a static issue. He said it's a journey as much as life is a journey. He said that we do have psychic landmarks that come through in our voice, and that the circumstances and conditions in which we're living change, but your voice is unique in every different situation. So your voice is your voice. You're going to have these psychic landmarks. And how you feel is how you feel. And basically, how you feel is your voice. Kim stated that your voice is reflected in the rhythm and breadth of your work. She didn't really elaborate much on that, but I thought it was interesting, the rhythm and breadth of your work. There's a cadence a lot of people have in how they write and how they read their poetry, and you can definitely tell it. And the breadth, of course, that's variable by far. Partho, your voice is specific to you. She said, rather than saying something is pink, you'd want to make it more personal to you. You might say it's as pink as my grandmother's slippers. It's something that helps to, bring your voice out. Okay, lunchtime poem. I'm taking advantage of my situation here. I'm going to read you a poem. I wrote this at lunchtime. It was a nice long lunch on the Embarcadero, which was it was a beautiful day. It was really exciting for me to go to San Francisco. I don't know if you guys get to go there very often, but I don't go very often, so it was kind of like being on vacation. I was stimulated to write this because of the discussion we had on finding your voice. I had been working on this poem for a couple of weeks. There were 2 prompts involved. One was about having epiphanies. That was one prompt. And the other prompt was about being overwhelmed with too much to do, too much work. So I was like, oh gosh, how do I get this? And I wrote a couple of poems. Nothing seemed to work. And then I started thinking, okay, well, finding my voice. Okay, so here it is. And it's called Soulful Needs. A veil is lifted, the path clearly visible, an epiphany of sorts, circumstances allowing for the revelation. Knowing leads to action, commitment follows. Enthusiasm, unquenchable for a while. Excited to make a difference. Motivation is strong, compensation unnecessary. Accepted by a community, expectations mount with participation. Time is taxed, the light begins to dim. Accountable guilt stirs behind my eyes. Competing priorities rise again. Relevance to who I am questioned. Searching for a way out, almost an obsession. Returning to your comfort zone based on soulful needs. Balance found only with continual motion at the fulcrum of my life. So that was the poem I wrote. Thank you. At lunch on the Embarcadero, from being stimulated with this poetry summit. It was loads of fun. Okay, there was a session on editing. Again, it's one of those first 3 points that I told you, only submit your best work. Reviewers are unforgiving and impatient because there's so much competition out there. One of the guys, he was a professor emeritus from San Francisco State, I think. And he said, if you don't want to get past the second stanza, just throw the thing away. Just throw the submission out. Don't even worry about it. There's just too much other work out there that needs to be seen. He also said, don't use language that's too uncommon. He said, one of the biggest mistakes in poetry was that people started writing to the intellectuals instead of writing to the common person. Shakespeare was very successful because he wrote to the masses. He used language that people understood at the time, for his plays and his poetry. Don't use words that you haven't heard within the past 2 weeks. That basically was his rule of thumb. And just make it easy on yourself. And then someone asked him, can you tell when a poem is done? And he said, well, you might think your poem is done, but don't worry, you'll get over that. Eventually, you'll start writing about it, thinking about it again. That was fun. Some more editing tips. This was by Blue Light Press, the person from Blue Light Press. She said, what you take out of a poem typically improves what you leave in. Shorter is better. You can take out a lot of stuff. There's so many words that you don't need to have in your poetry. Pay attention to line breaks. Regardless of how great the content is, if the line breaks aren't right, then the poem fails. It's not going to work. The message isn't going to get through. Free yourself from autobiography, which is some advice that I've heard over the years. It doesn't have to be about your life. It can be about something else. My friend over here says that she wrote poetry as if she were a silky. You all know what a silky is? No? It's a seal that loses its skin and becomes a person magically for a time, and then they go back to being a seal again. That's a silky. It's an Irish tale, right? So take yourself away, take your poetry away from yourself and use your creative mind that way. Resist the urge to tell the reader what they already know. I actually like it when a poem is very clear to me and I can understand it. It's great. I'm really lousy at tying things together. It's just one of my failings when it comes to literature. But they said you don't need to spell out every single detail. A lot of times it's very exciting for a reader to make the connection themselves. And I do that actually sometimes in my book here. If you read my stories, I don't tell you what the moral of the story is in any of those. It's just that these are things that happen. But if you think about what's going on, you can convert that to life lessons. Let's see. Pay attention to the way you use verbs. That was pretty interesting. Pay attention to the way you use light and sound, silence or cacophony when you're using those types of verbs. They thought not, try to stay away from being flat with the verbs that you use. Incorporate all of the senses. Now, I didn't get that from the seminar, the summit. I got that from a poet friend that I work with on a weekly basis. And he always says, if you can use sight, smell, sound, and touch, if you can describe those things in your poem, people will connect with it. So I thought it's good advice. And then make every line sing. So the ultimate poem. Now this was a question that they asked the panel members at the end of the day. And it was, what makes a poem something that the readers will remember for years? I mean, why do people remember T.S. Eliot's poems and things like that? It was a real tough question for the panelists to answer. I mean, after all, if we really knew that, we'd all be amazing poets, right? But they gave it their best shot anyway. It should contain wonder. It should be awesome, awe-inspiring. It should be have a musicality to the poetry with verbal and non-verbal cadence, creating a homophonic translation. Anybody know what that is? I didn't ask when I was there, but you can kind of have a sense for what it might be. And then they should reserve a space for silence and fill a space that is currently empty. There should be a need for the poetry to come out. The ultimate poem continued. Philosophically, one of the guys said, Tongo, he said that a poem for the ages begins even before the pen is put to paper. So it's something that's out there already in people's minds, probably instinctually, and then to be able to write it down and put it in paper so people can look at it and say, aha, oh yes, I agree, I understand that. A nuance to consider is that there are living relationships to the ideas you write about. And then the poetry that lasts in our minds has so much meaning that we learn to live their lessons. It's something you just don't forget. You don't want to forget. So really that's it. I do have, I've got a 4-page summary of this that I wrote up. If anybody wants it, send me an email at laufer@gmail.com. That's my email address. I'll be happy to send you the notes so you can have them and refresh your mind. If anybody wants to look at any of the handouts, I have a few up here, like the end poem one. I have those and can show you those as well.
Q&A?
Any questions? Yeah.
Q&A?
What about your book?
My book is here. So I started this project in 2018, I think. And what happened was I went to a funeral of a woman that was part of my roots, Marjorie Pack, and I went down there and I hadn't seen these people in 30 years. I hadn't seen her in 30 years or whatever. And we were all inside this little church-like thing, and the coffin was open, and there were families around, and the guy came up to shut the coffin. And this kid, he was like 12 years old, stood up. He said, "Wait a minute, don't close that. People aren't done saying goodbye." It was very touching and very, he was a nervy kid, just like the kids I grew up with, it was really interesting. Well, I got home and I started thinking about it, and I usually wear a fedora, like the picture, and I had it on the table. And I noticed, I said, well, if I were to go tomorrow, all my kids would have left of me is my empty head. So I said, I'm going to start writing my stories down for them. So these are stories that I've told them over the years, and I've told other friends and family members and things like that. And they're all just single pages. There are a few illustrations, 13. I wanted 15, but my illustrator bailed on me. She decided to move away and couldn't finish it. But so there's 183 different stories in here, all about different aspects of life, from when I was a little kid, my first memory being in diapers to
Oh my gosh.
even recent ones, so even recent memories. But it's a fun book to read. I do send one story out every single week. Every Sunday, I send one of the stories from here out to anybody who wants one. So if you want me to send you a story a week to be on that group, send an email to dadlaufer@gmail.com, and I will be happy to include you in that email. Otherwise, the book's $15 if you want to buy it. All right, where was I? Questions? Yes?
You talked about the importance of line breaks in a poem.
Yes.
Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, line breaks basically is punctuation. Well, one of the, if you're not going to use punctuation, like I never use punctuation because I don't really understand it very well. Like I was telling you earlier, sometimes it's difficult for me to understand the difference between a comma and a semicolon, for instance. I just don't get it. So when I found out I didn't have to use punctuation, I was thrilled. And yeah, this makes poetry so much easier. So like for me, I use spacing also for the sentences. Like for one of the lines on the first line of the second stanza is knowing leads to action, commitment follows. Next line, enthusiasm unquenchable for a while. The way you read it, that has your rhyme, your rhythm, and your cadence comes into that.
You should pass that around, Andrew.
Sure.
Andrew, I was gonna say on that, the line breaks that I was thinking of is, not to have a complete phrase, like, I ate applesauce. I ate and applesauce is on the next line, or like this, what you read just now. I think you had the word continue or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Read that last, but that would be the first word of your next line, because then it's kind of like a river rolling downstream over little rocks and things.
Yeah, line breaks are kind of like a river rolling downstream. And if they're not done well, the water's going to go off somewhere else.
Otherwise, it's too choppy if you just have like complete phrases.
Yeah.
Flow. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. So yeah, line breaks is very meaningful. Bernard.
Yeah, I'm glad you had some slides about editing, because it's always been a real big question of mine. Writing poetry, like prose, novels and stories, you have grammar, line and copy, and developmental editors.
Yes.
There's a whole rash of things which they can do. But how the hell do you edit a poem?
Right. Exactly. How do you edit a poem? I've used an editor from CWC. That's the person who did my book. Did it. Her name is Donna Reese. You guys know her? I met her right here. She's sitting right over there. And raised her hand, said that she was an editor. And so I said, oh, well, by the way, I'm writing a book. And so she used it. We went through an interesting process. I wrote the story. She read it, made edits. I took her story and looked at it again, and I wrote it one more time and shared it with her. And then she would send me back edits if she thought she needed to, but I wouldn't return it after that. So we never really got, we did get in one or two arguments. That's not a story. That's not a correct ending. She didn't. I didn't stick to the full story, the whole arc of the story sometimes in my stories. It's just the type of writer I am. So we had some differences there, but she did a great job for me, and I really appreciate it. But yeah, I don't know what to do. I've got quite a few poems too written that I do want to probably put them in a book. So I'm going to ask somebody to try to edit them for me. I have a couple of good poets that I know that I will ask, and they will, they go for the emotion and the feel and how the river is flowing.
So did it mention anything about articles? Because it seems like some of the best poetry lacks, it's very few articles. And
Could you say that louder?
articles, using articles in poetry, I think slows it down and makes it more like prose rather than music.
Yeah, no, they didn't get too much into that. But again, it's one of those things to make everything as crisp as possible, to take out any words that don't need to be there. So that kind of would go along with that, I think.
Have you had any of your poems published?
Just a few. I'm not sure what's published in this book.
What book is this?
By the way, this book is up on the table. I think this is the last one that's up for grabs. This is an anthology from CWC members. I'm in here. I didn't even know that till today. So I'm not sure. I submitted a poem and I submitted one of my stories. I'm not sure which one it is, so I have to take a look. Yeah, isn't that nice? Visions, life through the eyes of Sacramento Rangers. Yeah, it's great. I have 2 poems in an anthology from the Sacramento Poetry Center that is called More Than Enough, and that is out on Amazon any day now. It's going to be out on Amazon. So that's from different poetry groups throughout Sacramento, and I took a couple of poems from each person. And now that I've been in poetry for a while, I submitted these poems, I don't know, probably 6 months ago. I'm looking at one of the poems and they're going, oh, why did I even put that first stanza in there? You know, now I was like, oh, I shouldn't have had that. So I'm going to read it. I'm going to do a reading. It hasn't been set yet, but we're all going to get to read our poetry on stage, and I'm going to leave that first stanza out when I read it. Nobody will know. Nobody will be watching the book, so I'll just read it. Yes?
Did you just go to it was like a poetry day? Because that whole conference was awesome.
It does look awesome. Yeah, just went to the poetry day. You know, they didn't really spell it out in that brochure either. You can't really tell what the poetry day was. So, but there were quite a few people. There were probably 50 people in attendance at the Poetry Summit. So it was really exciting. Lots of good energy there.
So the publishers you mentioned were specifically poetry publishers.
Yes.
So when you attend the San Francisco Writers Conference, I would imagine you can go online to check what day is doing what. And sign
Yes.
up
Yeah.
for-
Yeah. Everything was online. It's sfwriters.org. In fact, if you want to go to if you want to go submit your poetry, they're having a contest. Go to sfwriters.org to do that.
And also sign up for their mailing list. Email list.
They have an upcoming contest?
Yes. It may be too late, but hopefully not. sfwriter.org.
I'm gonna write a poem about it being too late.
Yeah, that's a good one.
It's too late.
Blue Light Press. Blue Light Press, by the way, has a poetry workshop. And then if you go to bluelightpress.com, you can find out about their poetry workshop. I think it would be well worthwhile. She was really very good and very knowledgeable about her poetry. Let me see if I got any other notes here that I want you to know about. sfwriters.org for the poetry contest. Got that one for you. There's a thing, Chris, called an article or whatever called Carriers, or a book, Carriers of Letters by Irwin, to learn about writing without punctuation.
Without punctuation.
Without punctuation.
Carriers of
Carriers of Letters. If you Google that, you'll probably, by Irwin, you'll probably find out how to get it. And then, the recommended reading was, he said, every poet should read The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. I found out the other day he was going through a midlife crisis when he wrote it. He wrote another poem, I can't remember the name of it, I read it the other day. It was written about the same time, very impactful. Any other questions? Well, thank you. I hope you remember my poem. I hope that it's a memorable one for you. And I thank you for letting me stand up here and chat with you all. Have a good day. Anybody wants a hard copy of the PowerPoint? It's right here.
And thank you, everybody. That's it for us. Thank you for coming. And we hope to see you all next time. Bye.
Okay, thanks folks on Zoom.
Thank you. Have a good one.